Hi all, this video is covering content from section 2.3, Macroeconomic Objectives, specifically our fourth objective, equity in the distribution of income. We won't be covering all of the content of this section. We will look at equity versus equality in the distribution of income, why the market system may not lead to an equitable distribution of income, data on income shares in a country, the Lorenz curve, and the Gini coefficient. Equality and equity are words that get confused quite a bit. I get it. They look and sound similar, and they have similar meanings. I think this graphic really helps to show the difference. In each case, there are three boys who want to watch a baseball game. On the left, they are each given the same box to stand on to help them. They are treated equally. But is this fair? Is it the smallest boy's fault that he still can't see after he's been given this box? Equality is only fair when everyone has the same resources to start with. In this case, height. They've all been given the same assistance, but the outcomes are very different, as they each have a different set of resources to start with. The picture on the right demonstrates a fairer, more equitable distribution of the boxes that takes into account the original level of resources. Notice also that we actually use the same total number of boxes, but this time everyone can see the game. There is now equity in opportunity. So equality is each person receiving the same income, and equity is each person receiving a fair income. But what is fair? I'd love to be able to tell you the answer. I could definitely give you my opinion, but in reality this is something that we've been arguing about as a society for hundreds of years, and we will continue to argue about for hundreds of years. Everyone has different perspectives on this. At the start of the year, we looked at the three economic questions. I want you to pause now and see if you can remember these three questions. Jot them down. Of course, you knew that they were what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce, right? Yes. In this section, we concern ourselves mostly with the third question, for whom to produce. In a market system, people sell their resources to obtain income, with which they buy their stuff. Now, I'm sure you also remember the four resource types. Pause now and jot these down. And of course, they are land, labour, capital, and entrepreneurship. A key issue with equity in the distribution of income is that these resources are not distributed equally. People born into certain circumstances where they might have these resources have a greater likelihood of earning more income later on. You might see this yourself when you look around at your peers in class or in the wider community. Equity is hard to strive for as a community because many of us are not actually aware of our inherent advantages that we have. I've always liked this quote. Some people are born on third base and go through life thinking they hit a triple. So what this means is they attribute their success to their own hard work, when in fact it was their birth circumstances that played a large part. This cartoon below shows how this works with clear examples. There's a few pages, so you may need to pause to read properly. If we start with the basic assumption that all humans are deserving of having their basic needs met, we can see why a pure market economy will fail in this regard. There will always be those who have resources that they can't sell for enough in the open market to satisfy their basic needs. There will be times, we call these recessions, when people will be willing and able to sell their resources, but there's not demand for them. Due to the failure of the market system, governments have to become involved in redistributing income. After raising revenue through taxes, income can be redistributed through the provision of public goods, merit goods, and transfer payments. Next, we're going to look at some indicators of income equality or income inequality. Quintiles are where we split the population of a country into fifths according to their income. We look at the poorest fifth of the population and see how much of the total income of the country they earn. Then the second poorest fifth and how much they earn, and so on. We'll see this on the next slide. Deciles is the same concept except split into tenths rather than fifths. The Lorenz curve is a diagram that shows the information of income quintiles graphically, and we will need to know how to draw and interpret one of these. And the Gini coefficient is a numerical representation of the Lorenz curve. Okay, here we see the income quintiles in action. Looking at Bolivia, we can see the poorest 20% receive 2.7% of the total income, the second poorest 6.5%, the middle fifth 11%, the second richest fifth 18.6%, and the richest 20% of the population earn 61.2% of the total income. As I said before, deciles are the same concept, divided into tenths rather than fifths. We're going to be looking at the Lorenz curve now. It was invented by this guy, Max Lorenz. This shows the information from the quintiles graphically. Our axes are labelled as so. Make sure you know these. They are easily forgotten. Cumulative percentage of income on the y-axis and cumulative percentage of population on the x-axis. This diagonal line represents perfect equality, where everybody earns the same. Now, while this is called the line of perfect equality, it is not perfect in the sense that this is the ideal outcome. This would be an aspect of communism, and we've already seen the problems involved with this economic system. Here we see some actual Lorenz curves. This is real data for Belarus and Bolivia. And here's how this works. We plot the cumulative points on the diagram, starting with the poorest 20%. So, Belarus, 8.8%, poorest 20%. So we plot that, that's point E. Then we plot the poorest 40%, because this is cumulative. So that would be 8.8 plus 13.4 is 22.2% that they earn, the poorest 40%. You follow this and you connect up the dots. Of course, the Lorenz curve will connect at each end of the line of perfect equality, because the poorest 0% of the population will earn 0% of the total income, and the richest 100% of the population will earn 100% of the total income. Just to recap, for Bolivia it works the same. The poorest 20% here earn 2.7%, so we plot this, point A. Poorest 40 earn 9.2%, so that's 2.7 plus 6.5. Plot this at point B. We keep on adding the next quintile on and plotting the data, so point C is going to be 9.2 plus 11, which is 20.2%, and we do that for point D, and then, well, this point takes care of itself. Now it's your turn. I want you to plot out the following data and make your own Lorenz curve. Pause now and do this. Excellent. I'm sure it looks like this. If it doesn't, we have a little bit of a problem and you may need to rewind. When we look at a Lorenz curve, we need to know how to interpret it. Here's where we get a little bit fruity. Think of the area between the Lorenz curve and the line of perfect equality as being a banana. It's sort of a banana shape. Everyone likes big bananas, so the bigger your banana, the more money you make. That means there's less money for others, so income is not distributed as equally. The further the Lorenz curve is away from the perfect equality, the bigger the banana. If you look back, Belarus had a small banana, so income was more equal than in Bolivia, which had a big banana. That's how we show inequality diagrammatically. We can show it numerically too with what we call the Gini coefficient, invented by this guy, Karadu Gini. Now, here what we need to know is how the Gini coefficient is calculated, the formula, but we won't actually do the calculations. The maths is a bit tricky, so it's not included in the course. The Gini coefficient will always be between 0 and 1 because it is the area between the diagonal and Lorenz curve and the area under the diagonal, the total area under the diagonal. So really it's A divided by A plus B. It's always a value between 0 and 1, 0 representing perfect income equality, and therefore the greater the number, the greater the inequality. And Gini's got in the way of that word there, which is a bit annoying. Finally, we have Gini coefficients for the selected countries. Those with a more equal distribution of incomes will tend to have more socialist policies, such as progressive taxation, high transfer payments, and government provision of merit goods. We will discuss some of these policies in later lessons.